I've said this many times before, but I keep track of who's running for federal and state office who's openly non-religious. And one of the people that I've followed for a couple of years now, she happens to be an acquaintance of mine. I've known her for a while, and for reasons you'll find out later, is this woman. Her name is Sarah Henry, and she's running for the state house in Florida, District 38, and she's running for house. She's running to defeat a Republican, an incumbent Republican in the state legislature. And Florida is one of those states where, Governor Ron DeSantis has a Republican supermajority. They can pass whatever horrible legislation they want, and they have. If Democrats can turn like 5 seats, I think, in the state legislature, they can at least provide a roadblock to make sure Republicans can't do whatever they want. So that's the importance of flipping some seats in Florida, even if they're not going to take over the state anytime soon. And so Sarah is fighting that fight. A couple of years ago, she also did it. She's young. She decided to run a couple of years ago against the same incumbent. His name is David Smith. And even though it was her first time running for any elected office, check out what happened 2 years ago, 2022. Sarah's first campaign, she lost, but look at how close that was. She lost by like 4 percentage points, a few thousand votes. That's frustrating. She came close, but I mean, it's not like 1 vote difference, but it's close. So she decided, you know what? I'm going to do it again. In 2024, I'm going to run against this guy again. I now have the benefit of having done this once already. And anytime you do anything for the second time, you can correct any mistakes. You know where you need to push harder. And so she decided to run again this time around. And she has the added benefit of running against a Republican under Ron DeSantis, which means there's plenty of stuff people are not going to like about the other guy. Okay. So that's Sarah Henry for you. I really appreciate that she's running because she's doing what I just told you all to do a little bit ago, which is run for local office. So, and also, I've known Sarah for a long time. She was politically conscious as a young woman, as a teenager. She knew she wanted to create a better world. And so when she graduated from college, she decided to work in the nonprofit sector. And I really got to know her because she was working as a communications staffer for the American Humanist Association. And so that's how I began interacting with her. And I always thought, super smart. I can't wait to see what this person does later on. What was interesting about being the communications person for the American Humanist Association, though, is that means you got to represent the AHA when they're doing whatever it is they're doing. And about 5 years ago, 2019, there was a lawsuit that involved a giant Christian cross on public property in the state of Maryland. It was called like the Peace Cross, the Bladensburg Cross, but it was this giant Christian cross on public property. And basically the argument was, that's a World War I veterans memorial. It's not a Christian thing. We're just honoring the veterans. And if you look at it, you're like, dude, that's promoting Christianity. And the AHA filed a lawsuit. This took several years, but it got to the Supreme Court. And the question was, everyone can see this is a Christian cross. But if the city is saying it's a war memorial, can the city maintain it? Can they pay money to maintain its upkeep and support this giant Christian cross in town? And the Supreme Court ultimately said, well, it's been around for a long time, so it's fine. Tradition is all that matters. So if you put up your Christian cross like 50, 60, 70 years ago, let it stay. It's okay. Very annoying result. But the American Humanist Association was the group filing that lawsuit and fighting against it, which meant at one point, Sarah Henry was tasked to go on Fox News on Laura Ingraham's show, and defend what the AHA was doing. And I've seen that segment. She does a wonderful job explaining that, what the AHA is doing is not anti-Christian. They're just trying to represent everybody. This is about church-state separation and the proper role of government. So again, but that's the sort of thing Sarah had to do when she was working for the AHA. She also worked for their newsletter. And this is an example. I want to show you this too. She did an interview with someone who had written deeply about white supremacy, male supremacy, the patriarchy. She was interviewing someone for the American Humanist Association's like online newsletter. And this is one of the questions that Sarah was asking this researcher. Check this out. This is SH, Sarah Henry. It seems to me that more often than not, religious dominionism, white nationalism, and male supremacy are inextricably intertwined. Is that something you have found in your work? And the response, interestingly, is actually, I found a lot of secular misogyny. But she later goes on to say, yeah, there is religious misogyny too. And the thing is, now that we talk about Project 2025 and white Christian nationalism, what Sarah actually said makes a lot of sense. Like, yes, religious dominionism, the idea that Christians want to take over the country in every aspect, and white nationalism, and this make America great again sort of pride, and male supremacy. That stuff does go hand in hand. If you made the Venn diagram, you are looking at three overlapping circles by and large, right? But that's what Sarah did. She was doing an interview for the newsletter. So that wasn't a big deal. No one really cared at the time. I'm going to show you one other thing she wrote also, which is she wrote an article in 2018. Let me pull this up here, where she was writing just about a trend that had popped up in 2018, where there was a story about like witches and the rise of paganism and Wicca and all that stuff. And Sarah was just writing an article for their newsletter about, wow, this is becoming really popular. And look at what she writes here. Young people, and especially young women, have begun to turn to paganism and witchcraft. And according to their own words, an attempt to find identity, forge solidarity, and sometimes to take political action. Notice how she writes that, because she's not saying that's a good thing or a bad thing. She's just saying this is what they are saying. This is why they are turning to this. And remember, this is 2018. This is in the middle of the Trump administration. Things are not great for women across the country. And this is one way for women to fight back and get some semblance of power, right? By going to this. Sarah actually writes later in the piece here, while I'm not convinced of the power of hexes, crystals, or tarot cards, I can certainly agree with the desire to protect those among us who lack power and to recognize the worth of those who hear from society that they have none. And if it takes witchcraft to spread that message, then so be it. Like, good for them. I'm glad they're finding their power. I don't believe it, but I get why you'd like find something valuable in it. I get why she would write that. I understand that sentiment. So this is the Sarah that I have come to know. And when she said she's running for state government 2 years ago, my thought was, hell yes, this is the sort of person we want in government. She is a thoughtful person who would do a hell of a job. And she lost, but I understood, like, look, trying to unseat an incumbent is hard to do. Doing so when you're a first time candidate who, imagine all the things you have to learn to run for office at the state level. That's insane, but she came so close. I was super proud of her. And the fact that she's running again now, again, super proud of her. And just think about what would happen if Democrats could flip the House, or at least provide a roadblock in the House to Republicans who can just get away with anything. In Florida specifically, there is a need to fix, there's climate denial by Republicans in the wake of all these hurricanes. Revisionist history, where Ron DeSantis is sponsoring programs to teach like David Barton-esque fake Christian history and rewarding teachers who take training in that. Medical ignorance. The Surgeon General of Florida is like a vaccine denier. And outright censorship by DeSantis because they're all banning books and stuff. So the more Democrats they have who can help put a stop to this, the better. So anyway, Sarah's running in this race. The primary was earlier this summer, and neither the Republican nor Sarah had a primary challenger. So we were setting up for a rematch in a couple of weeks. So that meant both of the candidates could really just look to November and plan for an intense campaign before November 5th. But I think the race, I think the internal polling has to be close because the Republican is now going to crazy attempts to try to discredit Sarah. And the way they are doing it is just utterly insane. Okay. So let me take you back. I just told you she appeared on Fox News to defend the American Humanist Association's lawsuit that was in front of the Supreme Court. And she said in that interview, look, a giant cross honoring veterans, it would be fine on private property, but it didn't legally belong on public property, which is the reason they were filing this lawsuit. She's right about that. She has also said on behalf of the AHA that public school football and softball coaches should not be leading prayers before games because that's coercive. It puts pressure on non-Christian athletes to join in. And she was right about that too. I told you she talked about the mixture of religious dominionism and white nationalism and male supremacy. And now this dude, this David Smith Republican guy, is using all that to discredit her. Let me show you one of his attack ads that he's using against sweet, sweet Sarah. Here's one of them right here. Sarah Henry is so radical. She said the Christian cross is a symbol of discrimination and exclusion. Like, that is not at all what she said ever. Sarah Henry is so radical, she thinks the Christian cross is divisive and opposed optional prayers at high school football games. Those coach-led prayers, the reason they're a problem is because they're not really optional. There is pressure for students to join in. We know that. Henry even called Christians white nationalists. She did not. She didn't. They're not. But there are some Christians who are white Christian nationalists. It's called a subset. She did not say that, though. Sarah Henry is so radical, so extreme. Her hateful views of Christians should disqualify her from holding office. Like, my dude, her views about certain Christians are no different than the views of a lot of other progressive Christians. Vote against politician Sarah Henry. This may be my favorite thing about this mailer. Vote against politician Sarah Henry. The incumbent sitting Republican in the state house is calling Sarah, who's never held elected office, a politician. So that's just mailer one is what he's using. Let me show you a different one. Radical politician Sarah Henry. It's a lot of the same stuff, I know. Referred to Christians as white nationalists, the cross as a symbol of exclusion, and Christianity as inherently discriminatory. I see this comment, and I want to bring it up right now. Is that the worst photo they could find of Sarah Henry? The answer is yes, because she's a happy-go-lucky, very positive person. And yeah, the smiling picture is like the worst thing they could find of her. I also, look at this. Henry is an avowed atheist activist. Listen, as an avowed atheist activist, she is not that. She's way nicer than that. Leave that label to those of us who deserve it. My God. But otherwise, it's the same lies. This is an interesting mailer as well. This just, not only does radical atheist activist Sarah Henry hate Christians in highlights, like where has she ever said that? Where has she ever implied that? Nowhere. She makes dozens of hateful and dangerous remarks that make her unfit to serve. Right, we've been through them. This is, I think, the back of that same mailer. And look at this. They quoted the thing I already showed you. Young people and especially young women have begun to turn to paganism and witchcraft in an attempt to find identity, forge solidarity, and sometimes take political action. Not only is she, did she say the things in the quotation marks? Yes, but you remember the context. The context is, this is a thing that is happening. And she later said, I don't buy into it, but I get why some women would want to do it if it gives them some power at a time when Donald Trump and Republicans are trying to take it all away from them. Like, I don't know why any of that is crazy. They are. That was the whole point. It's a trend. This is interesting. Sarah Henry. Oh, by the way, this also says she said it in 2014. She actually said it in 2018. I think in 2014, she was like a junior in high school. I don't know. At the most recent meeting of the AHA Board of Directors, the organization expanded its scope of advocacy work to include immigration justice. Is that a bad thing? I did not know that was a bad thing. And by the way, if Sarah wrote that, that sounds like a press release. Like, that's not even a thing that you're like, the AHA voted to execute the following people. No, then if you're writing that as a press release, okay, but even though you weren't the one who voted on it, but she's literally saying they decided immigrants should have justice. Why is that bad? And then again, they're quoting from a question she asked an expert who studied this stuff. And she said these things are intertwined, which they are, but she's obviously not saying all Christians fit this particular mold. So what the hell are they doing? It's like just shadiness all around. And this, I think, is the last one I have. This mailer, Sarah Henry. Somehow they found an even better picture of Sarah laughing. Sarah Henry, hateful, dangerous, risky. Henry is a typical career candidate. My dude, she's like 21. I don't know how old she is, but like career candidate. She ran once and now again versus the guy who's an income. Okay, whatever. Who keeps running to promote the same failed policies that created inflation and skyrocketing prices for Florida families. My dude, Democrats have no power in the state legislature. If there are failed policies, they are by definition Republican policies. What the hell? And then look at the next sentence. In fact, Sarah Henry's hateful remarks towards people of faith, specifically Christians, she hasn't made any, and her comments about witchcraft being something young girls should turn to. No, I read you those comments. At zero time did she say girls should become pagan. She's like, this is a thing that's happening. I get why they might be drawn to it because they're certainly not drawn to like Republicans. What the hell? Like, I can't tell if this is a smear campaign or everyone who works for this other dude is just an idiot. Maybe it's both. I don't know. Okay. So these are the mailers they are sending around the community where they're running this race. By the way, I talked to Sarah about this, and she said over the past couple of weeks when these mailers have really ramped up, she knocks on doors everywhere. Her team knocks on doors everywhere. And everyone's like, are you supposed to be the person who's hateful and you hate everybody and you're evil? Because you're really nice. Which is true. Let me show you the campaign ad that this other dude, what's his name again? I have forgotten. David Smith. This is the ad David Smith is running in the community. Because even if you think most people are not reading the mailers and they're just throwing them away, he has now planned to spend $1.6 or $1.7 million on advertisements in the community. And this is the ad he is running against Sarah.
Red flags. We see them on bad plays, bad deals, and bad politicians. The red flags on Sarah Henry? Henry repeatedly attacks people of faith, called the cross a symbol of discrimination, called Christians white nationalists, even opposed optional prayer at school football games. Sarah Henry? Too hateful, too radical, too many red flags. But David Smith will solve problems, not start them. Veteran, leader, trusted. David Smith.
It's the same lies that I've already gone through, but that is what he is running with. And he's spending a hell of a lot of money to make that a thing. And again, this is why when Sarah's knocking on doors and people are like, oh, you're the lady from the commercial. I thought you would have smoke coming out of your head and red horns. And yet you are normal and smart. So that ad has aired, and it is so devious what the Republican is trying to do that recently the local NBC affiliate actually ran an entire article and segment debunking that video. And in the article that accompanied it, I wanted to show this to you. Get the facts. Red flag attack ads against Florida House District 38 candidate. They showed the ad, but I want to highlight a couple things here. Check this out, because they say this stuff in the piece. Here we go. Does Henry repeatedly attack people of faith? We call that false, for reasons I've already gone over, so I'm not going to read everything. On the claim that she's called the cross a symbol of discrimination, that's misleading. On the claim that she called Christians white nationalists, we'll call that mostly false. Mostly false because, yeah, there are some Christians who are definitely white nationalists, but definitely not all of them. On the last claim that she opposed optional prayer at school football games, we'll call that both false and misleading. Like, this guy's just lying about everything. And then, when this affiliate reached out to the Republican Smith to find out if he stands by the claims in the ad, they emailed him. In an emailed statement, Smith said, after conducting a review of the original source materials, the quotes attributed to her are accurate. Which, yeah, you can take things out of context and the quotes are accurate, but the way you are using them is obviously a lie. And he knows that. And look at how he says it. We looked at it, and the stuff we put between these are things she said. So, ooga booga, go away. Don't look at the context in which we are reframing everything she said to make her look horrible. So, this is how Republicans are playing the game. This is how they're lying to their own voters about what they're up against. Misleading voters is the only strategy Republicans have. If they told the truth, they would have no support at all, especially in Florida, a state that's been ruined because Republicans have taken over it. I don't know how effective that ad is, but when you put $1.7 million behind any campaign ad, people are going to see it. And so I will say one thing I did appreciate. I found this interesting. That ad that they are running against Sarah, think about the things you would expect Republicans to run on against Democrats. You might say, I would expect them to be like, Sarah supports abortion rights and human rights and voting rights and all those other things conservatives really hate. But no, they're running on the don't vote for this evil lady because she's not a Christian and she thinks Christians are evil, which is not true. And they're doing a horrible job of making that argument. It's inaccurate and it's offensive. Honestly, I'm surprised because it's gone out of style. I think if you use someone's religion or lack thereof as an attack, I think these days most people are like, ew, that's disgusting. If someone's Muslim, you don't say this person's evil because they're Muslim. Like, no, Muslims are fine if they're running. I want to know their policies. I have voted for Christians or Muslims or people whose religious affiliation I did not know all the time in every election. I want to know their policies. So I talked to Sarah about this. Here's what she told me. She said the ad and the attacks against her are disqualifying. They should be disqualifying for the other guy. She said, I'm really proud of the work I did with the American Humanist Association. She said that if you look at her platform on her website, and then maybe you could include her website in the comments, her platform has nothing to do with advancing her personal religious views because she's not here to foist her personal beliefs on everybody. Her platform is about affordable housing, reproductive rights, public education, gun safety, and protecting the environment. Things that are good for all Floridians, regardless of their religious background. So I have to wonder, is someone in David Smith's camp telling him it might be a good strategic move to attack someone's religious views and her work history in the nonprofit sector fighting for church-state separation? I don't know. I would think at a time when we're seeing more non-religious Americans than ever before, that's not going to work. I don't know what the strategy is behind it, but I did want to end this by showing you the ad that Sarah is putting up for everybody. Let me show you the ad that she's getting on TV these days, because It just shows you what a decent person she is.
Some people talk about ideas and others talk about people. David Smith would rather talk about me than his ideas and his record, restricting access to IVF and sponsoring radical anti-abortion legislation, draining hundreds of millions from our schools, and failing to address our skyrocketing costs. I'm Sarah Henry. Here's my ideas. Focus on bringing down the cost of living, protect our schools, and guarantee IVF and abortion rights.
I love that ad. I love her. Listen, if you're watching this, go to SARAH, Sarah, for FOR, Florida, FL. Sarah, FOR, FL. Thank you so much, Den, for helping me out there. Go there, check out our website. If you are able, make a donation if you can. Because this race was close 2 years ago when she was a new candidate. I suspect it's going to be close this time around. And how sweet would it be, not just to have her win, but to know that a Republican who tried to use someone's humanism against her failed, and it should fail, and she defeated him anyway, because most people in her community knew that a humanist is someone who's going to fight for everybody, regardless of their religious views. So proud of her for running, though, and I hope we'll see what happens in a few weeks. Okay, let's talk about any questions here. Are we sure they're a witch? Have we compared her weight to that of a duck? Yeah, honestly, I think pretty much they were like, she's a woman? Oh no, what's the worst thing we can say about her? What? Someone said something that rhymes with itch? Let's run with it. It's probably something like that. I assume that's what they talk about in their churches. At this point, blatant lies during political mudslinging is so ubiquitous that when you point it out, most people are so unsurprised they just ignore that blatant dishonesty. That is not wrong. It's unfortunately true that there is a lot of mudslinging here. I am surprised by the nature of the lies because it would be really easy, and I've seen it. I've seen it in the mail I get at my house, to just say, don't vote for this Democrat because they're like pro-abortion or whatever liberal thing you don't like. And then you just put red filters all over it. You could totally do that and it would have the same effect. But the way this guy is using her work history, which isn't a bad one, and he's using the fact that she's not a Christian to argue that she's anti-Christian, is just stupid. I don't understand the strategy behind it, because if you just wanted to go after her for being a Democrat, there are ways to do it that don't involve lying the way this David Smith guy is doing it. Again, I go back to what is wrong with everyone on his campaign. Are they all as dumb as he is? I have to think they are, because no one stopped him from doing any of this. Why are Dems not doing the same? Calling Republicans radicals and run the record, denying free and fair elections if they lose, cheering on an insurrection, banning books, and even censoring airwaves. Well, some of them are. Some of them think, and maybe rightly so, that the best way to go after their Republican opponent is by tying them to MAGA Republicans, Trump, all the insurrection stuff. But in some races, and again, I'm not part of any political campaign here. This is just me speculating. But I think in some cases, when a Republican is the incumbent, you're probably not going to get anywhere trying to convince them that Republicans are evil, because these people have already voted for a Republican in the past. Your best bet is to say, look, I am here for everybody. That guy is here for himself, his party, his people. He doesn't care about the rest of us. And it's probably better not to throw this guy's a radical, especially in a red state, but to say, here's what I bring to the table and here's why you should vote for me. Again, I could understand why that might be the strategy, even though personally, in my own mind, I want every Democrat to be like, have you seen these people? The entire party is broken. Do not vote for any of them for anything ever. But that's me, and that's why I'm not running for anything. And that's why no one's hiring me to run their campaigns either. Wouldn't it be amazing if we just lined up the differences in proposed policy and let people decide what they think is best? You know, every time I've seen surveys where they ask people about specific policy ideas, like student debt relief, is it a good or bad thing? All the Democrats' policies are always super popular, and Republicans' policies are always unpopular. It's only when you put the party label next to it or the candidate's name next to it that things start shifting because all the tribal allegiances kick in. But yeah, if we just did it based on policy, Democrats' ideas would win the day pretty much up and down the line on most issues. Yeah. Any thoughts on the Robert Robertson stay of execution? Do you think it'll work? I'm not an expert on this, but basically, my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, is this man has been sentenced uh, to die, and everyone involved in this man's case, the prosecutors, the defendants, Republican politicians in Texas, are all like, yeah, this guy didn't do it. Or at the very least, there's very good reason to doubt the reason he was given this sentence. And they're trying to get him off of death row. But this is Texas, where, you know, Governor Greg Abbott, the Attorney General Ken Paxton love killing people off when all they have to do is like sign off on it. And I think their latest gambit was, what if the legislature, in a bipartisan basis, what if Democrats and Republicans signed a thing saying, hey, you can't execute this guy tonight because we need him to testify in front of us in a couple of days? And they literally signed a subpoena for him to testify in front of their committee. And a judge is like, well, I guess the guy has to go testify. But now I believe where we are at with the case is that some Republicans are trying to overrule that decision because they really want to murder this guy. And it has nothing to do with any evidence because the evidence seems to say he's not guilty. I mean, personally, I'm opposed to the death penalty for any reason. If someone did it, whatever it is, put them in jail for life. But I don't like the death penalty. So it's been kind of heartening to watch even Republicans say we don't want this guy to be executed. That's new. We'll see what happens.